Hello again. Alistair McGrath, A Cloud of Witnesses, this time Jonathan Edwards. If anything, we know less about Edwards than we do about Martin Luther. Unfortunately, most of us don't know much about any of the great figures of Christian history unless we're in the tradition that they started. Let's talk about Edwards because it's been said that Edwards is actually America's greatest thinker. I'm not in a position to be able to evaluate that, but I respect the people who have said things like that. Edwards is America's greatest thinker, but most of us have never heard of him. So what was Edwards' contribution to Christian theology? Of Edwards' many contributions to Christian theology, that singled out for discussion here concerns the challenge posed to the proclamation of the gospel by the rise of modern culture. The reason for focusing on this aspect of Edwards' thought is that it is intensely relevant for anyone concerned with proclaiming the gospel in modern Western culture. 18th century New England saw the birth of attitudes which are now commonplace among many Westerners, especially in modern North America. In the 1730s, Edwards wrestled with the problem posed by a cluster of attitudes which were beginning to become a serious obstacle to the preaching of the gospel. He called these attitudes collectively Armininianism, although this term is not particularly helpful and need not concern us further. These attitudes are similar in many ways to Pelagianism, but with features characteristic of the American scene. It might be more helpful to refer to this movement as achievement Christianity. The passage of time has made this problem increasingly relevant, especially in cultures which are achievement and success orientated. To illustrate the problem, we may consider two difficulties Edward faced as he began his ministry in Northampton. The first difficulty centered on the idea of the self-made person. An emphasis upon personal achievement was evident in a number of areas of life. Commercial prosperity was held to be based upon personal dedication, work, or worth, and sheer hard work. You are what you achieve seems to have been the motto of many individuals at Northampton, particularly those who would eventually succeed in having Edwards expelled from the town. To individuals such as these, the leading Reformation idea of justification by faith apart from works was at best silly and at worst outrageous. It suggested that their personal achievements were of little consequence in getting right with God. In fact, it even seemed to imply that these achievements might get in the way of their coming to faith. Far more acceptable to such people was the idea that Christianity was basically some useful spiritual assistance and support in the quest for self-achievement. In other words, they wanted their religion to be about God respecting and endorsing their accomplishments. A second difficulty arose from the halfway covenant, which encouraged congregations to admit nominal Christians. In his church, Edwards thus encountered a large number of individuals who had been baptized for the sake of social convention and who viewed attending church as a civil duty. The idea that they were somehow sinners seemed offensive to such upright citizens. They were halfway to faith, but how could they be taken the remainder of the way? How could they be convinced of sin and of the need for repentance and conversion? So the how could they be convinced of sin and the need for repentance and conversion? I'll have to wait for another video. I wanted to link here the video we did on Edwards because if you are an ex-Jehovah's Witness as I am, he's an unknown figure. And his absence from JW history, that is prehistory, the history they tell of times before C.T. Russell and their second president Rutherford, his absence from that is significant because if you knew of the existence of people like Edwards and their immense influence, and there's 100 other names we could name, some of whom are in this book, you couldn't believe what you believe, that God has been inactive in our world since around the year 100 when all the apostles were dead. So we're going to link that video on Edwards and another video called Salvation or Service, which comes first, which deals with the book of Exodus and Leviticus. The sequence of those books is of immense consequence in getting it right. What is salvation? Is it a reward for what you've already done in God's service, or is it in fact the beginning of effective service for God? Those links will be on your screen. Next time, hopefully, we'll be doing some follow-up on not only Edwards and his work, but also on such modern witnesses as C.S. Lewis and Karl Barth, also covered in this book, A Cloud of Witnesses by Alistair McGrath.